Hey guys, welcome back to the Brik House. Briknasty here with another Pokemon Unite video. Today we have week 2 of the Pokemon Unite U Impact tier list. Last week we had the first wave of patches that we went through, and this week we will be going through part 2 of the patches that happened. We're going to see essentially who's going to be the winner and loser for part 2. So don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And without further ado, let's just jump right into the video. So the first Pokemon we're starting with is none other than Dragonite. So Dragonite has been a pretty solid pick and has actually just received the defense and special defense buffs that we've seen a lot of Pokemon receive in these last couple patches. That aims on just giving it some more survivability for that late game. Already a solid pick, a pretty solid pick Pokemon I'd have to say, and buffs that will just make it a lot more reliable in that end game portion. So definitely worth moving up in this S tier pick. I think we can be putting him just above Aegislash for right now. Dragonite is a very reliable second stage Pokemon, and now with these late game buffs, it's going to be making Dragonite a lot more reliable during those Rayquaza fights. So next we'll be going on to Goodra. So Goodra had received a buff to its defense and special defense, similar to Dragonite. However, Goodra also received a buff on its Muddy Water and its Power Whip. So Goodra's always been a Pokemon who has been hovering around the bottom of the tier list for the last couple of weeks. These buffs are definitely well needed for Goodra to perform a lot better. However, it's still in a bit of an identity crisis kind of scenario where we have alternative defenders who are performing much better than it right now. So we'll still put it at the top of the could be better tier for this week. Although I do hope that we'd see some further changes to Goodra in the future. The next Pokemon we'll be going to is Gyarados, who they buffed the HP on and its flail. And Pokemon Unite was really just trying to target the early game for this Pokemon. Since Magikarp had been given out for free, a lot more players have been using Gyarados. Magikarp being a fairly weak Pokemon and damage based to get this evolution essentially, you were finding a lot of players getting KO'd in that early game, and which would set them behind. You can see Pokemon Unite definitely trying to make that aspect of Gyarados a bit easier. And Gyarados already being such a great pick is definitely going to just put him even higher in our solid pick tier. We'll put him right under Cerulean for this week, because the biggest issue that Gyarados was really having is just getting to that point of the game where you can evolve. And Pokemon Unite making that Magikarp phase a lot easier is definitely making Gyarados just that much more oppressive in this entire game. Ever since those buffs in the last patch, he's been performing very, very well, and now it's just a lot easier to get to that point of the game. So definitely going to be putting him very high at the top of the solid pick tier for this week. The next Pokemon we will be moving on to is Ho-Oh. So now Ho-Oh has had a bug fix and nerf to its Sacred Fire. It was doing a huge amount of damage, so they brought that down by around 30%. And they also nerfed its Fire Spin, trying to just kind of tone down Ho-Oh as it was being very, very oppressive. Ho-Oh, you can easily argue that Ho-Oh is the best defender in the game ever since that Sacred Fire change, and a Pokemon that you really do have to watch out for, that you will be seeing in a lot of your games that he doesn't banned in. However, being said, and I do bring this up a few times for this tier list, so you'll see here that like Ho-Oh has 77% ban rate, which essentially means that he'll be banned 3 out of 4 games. And similarly to that, right, Latios has an 84% ban rate, so he's only getting through that ban phase typically around 1 in 5 of the games you will be playing in the master ranks. To that point, this really being a list of Pokemon to play for the week, it's just really not likely that a lot of these master games you will be getting Ho-Oh. And to that extent, playing some Pokemon that actually counter these Pokemon very well is a really good strategy to try and employ over these next few weeks, as the games that they do get by, you may not even be able to play them. So it's good to have the second best option, which is also working as a counter to this best option. So as I said earlier, Umbreon is honestly a very good counter to Ho-Oh's playstyle. Honestly, I would say is the runner-up for the best defender right now. And given that 77% ban rate Ho-Oh has now, does want me to put him at the top of the solid pick tier. But again, if that can go down to around like a 50% even, I'll be a lot more inclined to put him at the top of the must play. But again, for this week, we'll just put him at the top of the solid pick tier. The next Pokemon we're going to be going over is Lapras. And now Lapras had a buff to its boosted attack, increasing its HP recovery per tick, as well as a buff to its perish song by reducing that cooldown by a full second. So some pretty solid buffs for Lapras, making it easier to get some of his combos off, as well as some more reliability towards that earlier part of the game. And he's always been in a very good position. Ever since he got nerfed after that Worlds performance, he has been a bit struggling on finding his footing as a consistent defender, but has essentially regained his position as just a very reliable defender. Really, right now is that these other ones is that we have other examples of defenders who can be much more reliable in a solo queue setting than Lapras is right now. But being said, Lapras is in a very solid position, and I think it's easy to put him at the top of the not bad tier for this week. So next we're going to be going on to Galarian Rapidash, who had a nerf to its Dazzling Gleam, special attack going down by around 15%. So again, a very, very strong Pokemon in solo queue. One of the hardest things about Rapidash is really the playstyle that you have to adapt to. Some of these speedsters like Dodrio have a really specific playstyle that a lot of people aren't really aware around. So even though they are some of the best, some Pokemon with the best win rates, they're not typically the best solo queue Pokemon to pick up. Being said, ever recently, Galarian Rapidash has been performing very, very well, and I think we can safely put it above Dodrio still for this patch. I think is an easier Pokemon to pick up than Dodrio, and will give you a lot more consistent output, as Galarian Rapidash is very good at backdooring or annoying the team, and I would say just a lot more consistent than Dodrio in that regards. So the last Pokemon we got to go over is Slowbro. And now Slowbro had a bug base as well as a buff. So in the last patch they did something fairly confusing with Slowbro. They nerfed its Scald while they buffed its Surf build while nerfing its Scald build. And Slowbro, being a fairly weak Pokemon, to be on a fairly weak defender, it was a bit confusing to see why they would go the route of nerfing it. And it seems now, after these patch changes came out, that was actually an error, and they were meaning to buff both Surf and Scald. So this latest patch now fixes the Scald and actually increases the special attack to 110%. So if you ignore the last patch, it's essentially just a 10% increase on Scald, but a 20% increase taking into account from that last patch. So very nice to see that they fixed that with Slowbro. Again, still a defender which I feel has the least potential out of them all. You can definitely win a game with any Pokemon that you choose if you play them correctly and you have a good team to back you up. However, getting results with specific Pokemon is a lot harder. And Slowbro, I think, is just one of the hardest defenders to just find consistent results in. Even when you play Slowbro at the highest level you can play him at, you're still at the whim to your team, where Pokemon like Goodra or Greedent are essentially able to distract an entire team or win an entire game and carry their own team on their back, and Slowbro just doesn't have the kit to pull that off, sadly. Slowbro still gonna be in a Brik position at the last place, and we're just gonna have to hope that, again, you'll get a move change in the future and something drastic can happen to Slowbro, which can kind of just put him in line with these other defenders. So that's gonna be it for this week's tier list. Now, we've had very minimal movement from this last patch. Some minor balance changements and adjustments that have happened. If I had to say who had the best buff this patch, I would either toss it up between Goodra having its Muddy Water and Power Whip buffed, or perhaps Gyarados with that early game now, that easy early game advantage it now gains with those HP increases and adjustments to its flail damage. As for the biggest nerf, I think it would easily have to go to Ho-Oh. He was the only real Pokemon this patch who got nerfed on various aspects. However, Ho-Oh still very likely going to be appearing in many games he's not banned in, and still going to remain very high with that current ban rate for those ranked games. So maybe they need to do a little bit more on Ho-Oh for some nerfs, or perhaps the answer is actually buffing these other defenders a little bit more, like Lapras or Crustle, and you know, kind of making those guys shine just a bit more, because there seems to be a bit of a hierarchy to the better defenders in the game and what they're able to do compared to the not so good defenders, the more inconsistent defenders in the game. So let me know down in the comments what you guys think of this week's tier list. Or any Pokemon you think should be higher up, any Pokemon you think should be lower down. I'd love to know in the comments. And thank you guys again for watching the video. So I've been Brikcina. You can't see me. Stay nasty, guys.